Welcome to Inside the Islanders. I'm George Matthews. Guesting with me, the general manager of the Charlottetown Islanders, Grant Sonier. His hockey club, the Islanders Front Page News, on the island here over the last 3 weeks with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League trading deadline. And of course, when you take a look at the trading deadline, a number of transactions, Grant, that you put forth over the 17 days. You make 12 trades, 20 players changed teams potentially, along with 22 draft picks. That's a lot of work done over those 2.5 to 3 weeks. But before we talk about the trading deadline, just a couple of questions. Firstly, since I haven't talked to you since September and the latter part of training camp, your hockey club starts out very well at the start of the season, going 10-2-1. From that point on, things have turned the other way. When did you decide at some point to make some drastic changes at this trading deadline?
Well, when we were 10-2-1 and we were nationally ranked, I was probably the most cautious person on the team. I think we got out of the gate because of all the hype that was going around with the new ownership and just the newness of everything, including myself and all the new players. It got masked a little bit by the great goaltending that we had, but we looked at this going in. We looked at our age groups, and there were a little bit of a mismatch going on. And as things wind down, and I've said this from the very onset, it's about evaluation. You have to self-evaluate your hockey club, and it became quite evident. Even when things were going really, really good at the beginning, we tried to keep our expectations in check. I think it was important to realize that there's some pieces that had to move in order to get the age groups into the right order to grow our hockey club. I don't like to dwell on the past. People talk about the past. It's never been done here in the past, and I think it was something that had to happen based on the reaction I'm getting. A lot of great positive feedback by people. They think this is something that had to happen, and we talked as a staff. This isn't my doing. This is a team, an organizational thing that we're doing here, and we think we made some good moves for a bright future.
Grant, when you look back at the draft this past June and you end up with a couple of significant pieces in Sprong and Goulet, how much did that play a role moving forward, looking at potentially their development?
It's significant. The impact that these two young kids, and there's other young kids that have had great impacts, but these two in particular, it's proof that drafting well can have a major impact on your hockey club, but it's also proof that we've got pieces in place now that we can grow with. So their early success has given us a lot of hope and a lot of faith that we can build this team in the right direction. So moving forward with those pieces in place, we had to add some other pieces obviously.
Talking about adding the pieces here, let's break down the trading deadline and mention 4 or 5 of them. As we said, you make 12 trades. We don't have time to get those all in right now, but as far as the trading deadline was concerned, you kick it off with trading a couple of players, Leduc and LaPlante. In return right now, obviously in all these trades as well, a number of draft picks are involved here, first rounders and second rounders, but here in Charlottetown to finish up the season, you end up with Luc Deschênes.
Yeah, Luc is he's a Maritime kid, born and raised in Fredericton. Really interesting history in this kid. He dropped in the draft for whatever reason, but our scouts had him ranked in the first round. He's an undersized defenseman that brings a lot of power to his game in terms of physicality, but he's an offensive two-way defenseman. Played major midget at the age of 13. He was an icon when he was a young teenager, and we think he's going to get his feet wet here. He had an injury last night, but hopefully he's going to be all right. But long-term wise, he's a 97 born, so he's a 16-year-old with tremendous upside, so a big piece that we can grow with our hockey club.
Then following that up, you trade Authorization and Bursey. Both guys add some character and some physicality to your team, but they don't fit the timeline moving forward.
Well, when I talk about evaluating, there's no question both players gave it their all when they were here. Very liked in the community, did a good job on the ice for us for what they could offer, but they weren't going to be overage players for us next year. So we've got a plan in place for our overagers next year. So we decided we'd move them out and get some young assets in return.
Of course, that's prior to Christmas. Post-Christmas, it gets a little busier, and there's some big names that you move out here. The very first one, it's a tough trade to make, Antoine Bibeau, who has, for Bibeau, he's a guy that has played significantly well here in Charlottetown since coming here. His numbers this year were terrific, last year as well. But you make a trade. draft picks involved, but you end up with goaltender Mason McDonald 2 years younger.
Well, there's really two prongs to this one. We had to, in order to do this, we had to believe in Eric Brassard, and we really do. Eric Brassard has come in here for a 5th-round pick. We would do that every day and twice on Sundays. He's been an excellent acquisition. We believe he's ready to take the ball and run with it. And then we would not have also traded Antoine to Val-d'Or if we didn't have Mason McDonald as a side deal ready to go. So Mason's upside being a 6'4" goaltender is tremendous. He's going to be on national TV here in a week's time, where he's going to be playing in the CHL Prospects game. We think the world of him. We knew him very well going into this whole process. So to have him as a 96 born and to have Eric Brassard as a 95 born, they fit into exactly what we're doing.
So moving past that, again, part of the 12 trade package that you were involved with here, as far as the Islanders were concerned, you go to the last day and things go relatively quiet, though you did say in days prior leading up to the deadline that, in fact, there was interest in some of your players. Now, some of these player moves perhaps caught people by surprise. First, let's talk about the trade of Graves and what you got back in return there.
It was the most difficult from a logistics standpoint. Ryan had a no-trade clause. He was a first-round pick 3 years ago. I said it in the other media outlets. He came in as a boy and he's left as a man. He's developed into a really good hockey player, good enough that one of the better teams in the league want him for a long playoff run. And it was early in the morning on the final day that the name David Hanley came up, and that got us all excited. I woke our head scout up. He was on the phone with us while we were in the war room, we called it, in my office, and we debated that back and forth. But to get David Hanley, who's a 6'4", first-round draft pick, the third of 3 Hanley brothers, all played in Val-d'Or, all from Val-d'Or. The reason he became available, the family decided it was too much pressure on him to follow in the footsteps of his brothers. Just watched him play at the under-17 for Team Quebec, the World Championships. We're really excited. You get Luc Duchesne, the small, skilled, undersized, power play type D-man, and you get David Hanley, the 6'4", snarly, really hard to play against stay-home defenseman. You've got those two pieces now to grow with your hockey club.
We've mentioned a couple of times in this interview timelines and players, whatever. Number 26, Alexei Pepin, sort of fit into your timeline. Just his second year here in Charlottetown, the second overall pick a couple of drafts ago, and but in return you get a couple of first rounders for him.
Yeah, there was a lot of mitigating circumstances around moving Alexei Pepin. We don't want to get in and dwell on the negative that happened from the onset of my training camp, my first training camp, other than it was well documented, came in highly out of shape, highly overweight. We worked on that. He was a player that I think it's fair to say from the moment he was drafted here, it wasn't his desired environment. And we've said all along, we want players that want to be here. We're doing things the right way. Ownership has allowed us to do the things the proper way, and we decided to move Alexei, and the return is great. The 2 first-round picks, there's futures involved with coming back to us at the draft, and I think people are going to be just floored when they realize what's coming back our way.
Now, players want to be here. That's important. We mentioned Antoine Bibeau, how much he was part of the dressing room, how much he liked playing here. Perhaps as tough a trade, despite the age at a level of the player we're talking about here, was the captain, Big Jack Nevins. He loved it here. That was a tough trade as well.
Yeah, it really was. I grew very fond of Jack. We had a lot of conversation prior to training camp. He was, for those that don't know, he was ready to give up on hockey, and his story is a great one that we'll use for other kids to motivate them. He decided he'd come here and give it his all, and as a result, he's leaving with a contract by the Montreal Canadiens. He captained our hockey club. He was a big reason why we were able to get our team off on the right foot, and he was a big reason why our team was able to continue to motivate itself and be highly competitive. But a rental player, we'll call him, to Randa. He's an overage player that's got 2 months in the playoffs left in this league, and the yield we got for him, you know, my other GMs in the league are surprised at how much Randa gave up. But we get a first, a third, a fifth, and a player for Jack Nevins, and it was something we had to do. I talked to Jack prior to the trade. he said, I don't want to go anywhere, but if you have to trade me, I'll go wherever you want me to go. And that answer made it even harder for me to trade him, because it's the ultimate answer. You know the player doesn't want to go anywhere, but he accepted the trade like a pro that he is, and we obviously wish him and all the other players that have moved nothing but the best of success.
The highlight players coming in at the trading deadline, Hanley, obviously, Luke Deschênes, as well, Mason McDonald. But having said that, you've got a number of first-round picks, second-round picks coming over the next couple of drafts. Go over those as well for 2014, 2015.
On paper, we have 6 first-rounders in the next 2 years. We have 3 this year and 3 the following year. 2 of the 3 the following year involve future assets coming our way at the draft. And as I said, people will be excited when they hear and find out what 2 players are coming here to join our hockey club next year. And that will start to fill the process in, and that'll start to expedite the process, because they're experienced players that will come in here and help groom and grow our players. We can't be a completely young team and expect them to evolve the proper way. There will be pieces like the Peltiers and the Avons that are acquired in these deals. There are going to be players that are going to be asked to help lead our hockey club, along with the Corteses and the players that remain in our locker room. So these pieces coming back now, with the 3 picks in the first round this year and the 2 second-round picks, we'll have some tough decisions to make. Depending on the depth of the draft, we'll select players that we think can come in and help our hockey club right away, or we'll use those pieces to go out and get some more pieces to fill in the blanks.
When you look at the roster moving forward, there's reason for excitement here when you talk about the young core group that we have in Charlottetown here right now. You've got on the roster, as we do this interview, you've got 3 16-year-olds, a couple of defensemen that you talked about, Sprong here, who looks to be a game-breaking player. You've got 3 17-year-olds, a couple of forwards that have been here. When you look at Cameron Kiley as well, of course, you've got Goulet, then a goaltender in Mason McDonald. You've got those draft picks as well. Moving forward into the next 2 or 3 years, things look to be pretty exciting here in Charlottetown. But speak to us on a final question here about the rest of this season here, what you expect from the young players, your team overall, and what the fans can expect here.
Well, based on the really all the great positive feedback we've gotten from this rebuild, we'll call it. I don't like to use the word rebuild, because that'll suggest that we're not going to be a competitive hockey club. We're going to compete. We're going to be a hockey club that excites the fans right now. And for those fans that don't understand, I hope they can at least grasp what it is we're doing. If you survive in the league as a mediocre team, you're never going to get to the pinnacle. And our idea, when I got involved, and I know when the ownership got involved, and I know the coaches are involved for the same reason, we're all on the same page. We're trying to win something here. So we had to take a step back to take 2 steps forward, and that's what we're doing. But moving on for the rest of the season, we're going to manage the workload of our hockey club. We're going to demand the same as we did at the beginning of the year, that our club comes out, works as hard as they can. We've got a great coaching staff that's teaching and coaching, and the development process will take some time. But if people can be patient with our hockey club, they're going to see an end result that will really excite them.
That's Islanders GM Grant Sonier. For Inside the Islanders, I'm George Matthews.